that you're here. And we're welcoming all of our folks watching online. Welcome, wherever you are, may you be blessed. And it's a joy to have folks back in the sanctuary as we do this, because it's been 3 years since we've been able to open up and have this, and so yay, people. Yay.
Give yourselves
I'm
a
so glad
hand.
you're here. So glad you're here. We've got a Cracker Jack panel, which I'll introduce in a minute, but we're going to start with our host, a sponsor from the Atlanta Science Festival. This is Dr. Jordan Rose.
Oh, thank you.
Yes.
I haven't earned that doctor, though.
Oh, well, now you have. Now you
Honorary
have.
degree,
Honorary
yes.
degree.
Well, hello, everybody. I'm Jordan Rose. I'm the executive co-director of Science ATL. We're the organization, the nonprofit that produces the Atlanta Science Festival every year, and we also offer a number of youth and school partnership programs to build a science community in Atlanta. And so thank you for being part of our science community. We're really happy that you're here tonight because community is really important, and one of the largest aspects of community is faith community. I mean, y'all are really important to the fabric of Atlanta, and this event that ties together faith, spirituality, science, justice. This is what community is all about, and we want you to know that science is a really strong part of that community. So I am really grateful to Pastor James and Pastor Paul. I got my pastors mixed up for hosting us tonight, and this community, this very hyper-local community, this congregation is very special to Science ATL because our offices are just upstairs. And so we have a home here, and we're so happy to welcome you into our collective home tonight. I also have a great relationship with Dr. Erica Holloman Hill through the organization that she works with, West Atlanta Watershed Alliance. They've been a longtime partner of Atlanta Science Festival as well. And Rabbi Dan, I just met tonight, but we've been emailing about some other stuff, so I'm really excited. And personally, I'm a member of the temple where he has connections as well. So really happy to be here, and I'm going to turn it back over to Pastor James. Yeah. Thanks so much. Oh, a note on logistics. You all have those postcards. Those evaluations are really important to the festival. We are scientists, we like data, so please complete those, return those to us at the table in the back of the room. That helps us know who is in the room and who has access to science learning opportunities. And that helps us to find other ways to broaden that access to people who have barriers. So thank you for being here. We appreciate you. Have a great night. Enjoy.
Much. Yes. And when we were asked to host the Atlanta Science Festival office here, I said, we're not looking for tenants, we're looking for partners. And so we shook hands that we would get to host a panel every year. So here's the layout. We're going to have a conversation up here for about 30 minutes, and then we're going to open it up for Q&A, for questions. And I'm not promising answers, but you can raise questions. And folks who are watching online, on Facebook, or feel free to text or comment your questions, and we'll be looking at those as well. Okay, so we are delighted. I'm going to move from my right down the line here. So Pastor Paul Turner from Gentle Spirit Christian Church of Atlanta, and Dr. Erica Holloman Hill from the West Atlanta Watershed Alliance, welcome, and Rabbi Dan Medwin from the 6 Point Sci Tech Academy, amongst other gifts. And so I'm going to allow each person a couple minutes to introduce themselves, and then we're going to kick it off. Go ahead. Take it away.
You're coming this way.
We're coming this way. Yeah.
All right, so on your comments, good, very good, and excellent. Just letting you know. Anyway, as it's been told, I'm known as Pastor Paul. I'm the pastor of Gentle Spirit Christian Church. We are a church without walls, quite literally. Our worship is on Sunday mornings in Camler Park. And part of the reason that we did that was because when this church was founded 24 years ago, we were a predominantly gay, lesbian, bi, transgender church. and trying to find a building that we could have a, quote, traditional worship service time of 11 o'clock was next to impossible because everybody was occupied. So we got this bright idea that we would just move outside for a little while and we wouldn't have to pay rent for sanctuary, we could save money and eventually buy our own building. I gotta tell you, God operates in much different ways than we do. As a matter of fact, I've often said that if you want to make God laugh, let God know what you plan on doing. Because in this case, God did. We moved outside 15 years ago and we haven't gone back inside. And the reason for that is it changed the ministry that we do. We became very involved with the homeless, folks with mental health issues that can't get services in the city, and in lots of different kinds of advocacy. It also changed the style of church that we are. You know, there are many churches that talk about being open and affirming. Well, there's nothing like being open and affirming if you're outside in a park, because you never know what's going to come, and you have to be ready to be of service for whoever shows up. So that's what's kept me busy for the last 15 years. It's also what excites me about being on a panel like this, is because it's an opportunity where people come and stretch. How do we make these connections? How do we figure out how we get better in this world? And this particular panel tonight, I don't suppose many people stop and think about spirituality, justice, and science in the same sentence. Well, tonight we're going to help you with that they really do interconnect, and it really does make a difference to how we live our lives, whether we live those lives in safety and in a way that is supportive of each other. Thank you.
Wow. Pastor Cole, that's, right on. I'm Dr. Erica Holloman Hill. I am a true ATLian. I am proud to say it.
Go for it.
And I say so because I am a product of the science here in Atlanta. And the realities of some of the things we're going to get into today around justice, and being a product of the busing system that allowed me to graduate from Riverwood High School, even though I live and still live in South Atlanta, officially the city of East Point, but now the Metro Atlanta. Even the post office is like, East Point? No. So, but anybody who knows the politics of the Metro Atlanta region, I live in East Point. And so with that, just really excited to share what I hope will be an understanding of my lived experience as an African American woman with a interdisciplinary degree in marine science, grappling right now with all of these things, justice, science, and I can't help but be and remind my 4 sons, and I thank Mumu Fresh for giving me this jewel. We are spiritual beings having human experiences. And so again, I'm delighted to get into our discussion. I think it's just going to be a continuation from our Zoom call the other day. So thank you.
Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Hi, everybody. I'm Rabbi Dan. I was a math and science kid growing up, and there was a period in my life where I was convinced there was no God because there was no evidence. We couldn't see it, couldn't prove it. That's the way it was. But I knew a lot of people that I loved and respected did believe in God, and so I kept open that possibility that maybe someday I would believe in God, and now I'm a rabbi focusing in science and technology. I started in college doing computer science, decided I didn't want to spend my life in front of a computer screen, but then I spent the first 11 years of my rabbinate helping other rabbis with technology. Spending my life in front of a computer screen.
Tell God what you're going to do.
Yeah, right. And it was one of these moments where when the pandemic first hit, a lot of my rabbinic colleagues were very happy that I had spent all this time developing these digital liturgical tools that could now be used over Zoom. And so it was one of these, like, I was happy to be there at that moment in history. And after a few years of that, I've also been involved with the camp that I'm now the director of. This is a new position for me. I was on the founding board of the camp. I've been up on faculty every summer of the camp. And last summer, when I was up there in faculty, I had a revelation that this is really how I wanted to be spending my life. And that a summer camp where we influence children and we give them an amazing experience and confidence and skills and relationships and community, that's how I wanted to be spending my life. And now I'm the least tech-savvy person in my and we'll get into it as we go, but I really love the intersection of science and spirituality. It embraces both of my sides, and it's a real honor to get to be here with other folks who are interested in these topics, and to get to wrestle these ideas out and hopefully hear from you how you would like us to nuance or dive into any of these topics more deeply.
Thank you. Amen. So I forgot to introduce myself. I'm James Brewer Calvert. I'm the senior pastor here at First Christian Church, and my pronouns are he, his, and him. It's an honor to be here with you. Thank you. We tell our church folks and anybody who comes in to don't check your brain at the door, that we meet the holy at the intersection of faith and reason, that we come at life from all perspectives, and some of us are believers, and some of us are thinkers, and some of us are just trying to figure out what's going on. And so we're all here, we're all welcome, and let's get into it. Let's start with defining justice. I think that's a good place to start if you're going to talk about justice and science and spirituality. What is justice? What does it look like, feel like, smell like, sound like? The prophets spoke of God's will for tzedakah and mishpat, which are Hebrew words for righteousness and justice. So at the core of justice is mercy. So I'm going to give my definition, or prophets, and then we'll all kick it open. The core of justice is mercy, and the carrying out of mercy, the embracing of mercy, is the embodiment of righteousness. So you can't have one without the other. You can't have justice without righteousness, or righteousness without justice. And that God desires both for all of creation. And then if you look at the Greek, two Greek words that apply here are orthodoxy and orthopraxis. Orthodoxy means right belief or right worship, and orthopraxis is doing the right thing. Our orthopraxis precedes our orthodoxy. In other words, it doesn't make sense to worship rightly if you're not doing rightly. But at the same time, the worship enhances the doing. So it's a both and, if you will. Your thoughts, and just jump in as the Spirit leads.
I'm going to hop in real quick on the Hebrew word phrase, because I know you're going to have some things to say, and I want to just get this in quick before you get moving. So one of my favorite lines from the Bible, Deuteronomy 16:20, is tzedek, tzedek tirdof, justice, justice shall you pursue. And I know it's been translated in many different ways, but in my tradition, the reason that justice is repeated there is that it is an emphasis on the importance of doing this, and that the tirdof, the you shall pursue, is actually a command. It is something that we are required to do. Doesn't matter if your heart is moved to do it or not. It doesn't matter what your socioeconomic status is. Every person has to participate in this act of pursuing justice. And I think it stems from both our sense of spirituality and connection to other human beings. If we recognize the humanity of another human being, how can we permit injustice to happen to them? Mm-hmm. And I think the same is true from a scientific perspective, where we recognize that all of the perceived differences between us are minimal if they're there at all. For example, the definition of race, like there is no scientific definition of race. We are all human beings, and it is our shared humanity that I think compels us to work in each other's best interest. And that part of why I am a rabbi is both that human connection, but also to try to make the world a better place. Like that is a command, an obligation that I feel very personally. And at the same time, our rabbis later added to that lo alecha hamlacha limor, it is not your duty to complete the work, but neither are you free to desist from it. That the challenges we face as humans in creating a more just and perfect world can seem overwhelming and daunting, so much so that we might want to remove ourselves from that act. But the ancient rabbis emphasize that even if you're not going to finish the work of making a more perfect world, you still have to do your part, and you still have to play a role in that endeavor.
Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead, take it.
So, moving with spirit, I just want to start for me giving thanks to my mother, Catherine Smith. I am the only child of hers, and she was the only child of my grandmother, Maggie Smith, who I buried last year at 94. She was the only daughter of Everwest, who died 6 days after my grandmother was born. Everwest was not the only daughter, but one of the daughters of Eliza West, who is and was, and I say is, and we can get into that, the daughter of Martha West, whose name we know is Milner, and that she originally came to Pike County, Georgia, via Virginia. Just to bring myself, as we have this conversation around justice, my lived experience here in Atlanta, and the reality of us having some deep breaths to hopefully have some hard conversations, but be comfortable having hard conversations so that we can remember some of the things that you said, our humanity. And hopefully, as I didn't realize it, I guess I'm the scientist of the group here.
I took biology in high school.
To share a Earth systems perspective of the reality that I like to think of, and before I define justice, how I define environment, right? Being the natural, we can't control Mother Earth. We try, we can talk about the uncertainty, but then we have these other elements of environment, the social environment. We as humans have built a social construct on top of the planet. Out of that social construct or environment comes then our cultural environment, our social environment, our economic environment, as well as our political environment. And so in the context now of environmental justice, or this conversation between justice and spirituality, I think that there's just some grounding that I like to do that happens right about second grade Earth System Science. Everybody take a deep breath for me. Hold it. Exhale. Thank you for participating in what cycle that's so important right now? Air cycle. Carbon. Everybody's talking about climate change, right? But the reality is that we, as part of the biotic living factors on this planet, play this delicate dance with the abiotic, non-living factors of this planet. The laws of physics hold us in this natural space and grounds us for me, the conversation of understanding where science did nothing more but reveal the greatness of God and the depths of how deep spirit is.
And I'm supposed to follow this. Okay, Micah 6:8 says, you know what you're supposed to do. To be just, act merciful, and be humble with God. I know that doesn't give the definition of justice, but see, justice and mercy in the same sentence tell me a whole lot of what justice is supposed to be. You cannot have justice if you don't have mercy. You cannot have mercy if you don't have some kind of humble understanding of your creative place that you live. Whether you call that God, whether you call that the Big Bang Theory, whether you call it science. They all interweave together. And so for me, when I define justice, there's a new translation of the Bible, and it's about 5 years they come up with a new translation. And this particular fellow translated that phrase in Micah 6:8 as, you know what to do to be fair, to be merciful, and to be humble in your behavior towards God. And the first time I read that, I thought, wow, because see, justice for me has always been a hard thing. Because we live in a world that does not teach us justice. It teaches us getting even. It teaches us how to get ahead. It doesn't say anything about being fair. And so when that sentence come to me and we started talking about this panel, at first I kind of poo-pooed the idea. I was like, come on, James, come up with something more creative. But then I realized that if we could really understand how justice works with science and with our faith, we could have a better world tonight. Mm-hmm. We could have a better neighborhood tomorrow morning. We could have a town, hold it now, that didn't have homeless if we could just have this conversation.
So I heard you, and if, I do let Spirit lead, I think in this safe space in the house around race and the realities of this social construct, right, that does not allow for justice to be. So when you were describing the lack of learning justice, I was thinking about my own childhood experience and what I was taught. And my grandmama taught me justice. My mama taught me justice. I'm teaching my children it in the simplest things of, right from wrong, period.
Amen.
Period. And I think that sometimes we allow so much of our cognitive being and the ability of us to think to stop us from feeling and being spirit and going back to, I just hear my grandma, right from wrong. And at some point, it's an individual walk where you have to decide for yourself. And I'm watching my sons make these choices, even though they know right from wrong. And so, going back to the will of us as man, right? Justice being connected to a way of being becomes problematic and unjust when those individuals or any individual find ourselves in a position of power and make decisions, sometimes consciously, sometimes unconsciously, sometimes intentional or not. But regardless of that, the impact is what we end up dealing with, right? And so I wonder, and I push us all to have some real conversations with ourselves if we're really trying to get to this just world that is more about being just, because everything that I've heard is about a way of being, not how we often, especially scientists, like to write. And,
now, see, you just really hit on a really good point. there was a book written several years ago by a guy who was out of the Christian church. He was an evangelist, and the title of the book was Antagonists in the Church. And it was a great book because it told how congregations live and die and how gossip gets a hold of a church and it will kill a church in Sundays, not years, but Sundays. And as I read the book, though, I was disturbed because it seemed to me like the author was saying, you are an antagonist. You are an antagonist. You're an antagonist. And what you just said made me remember that I started teaching that workshop in my church, but I left something very important out. Nobody's an antagonist. They behave antagonistically. And I think that that's part of what you're talking about. Yeah, it's our behavior that we choose. And I think that that's why science is important. Because the more we understand how this all works, the less apt. I'm on dangerous ground, aren't I? You're going to
It's
cut
safe
my
space.
feet out from under. Okay.
Hey, safe space to have.
I think the more we know on how it works, the less apt we are to make a bad choice. I
How
think-
what works. The more we know
Yeah, I
how
was
what
gonna
works.
say.
How science
How
works.
science works. How is this all put together? How does it relate? Because we started this by saying justice and spirituality and science are all, or well, I said, is all interwoven. So I think where we fall short on all those issues that you were bringing up, which, you can't argue with that. But if it's about what we choose, then don't we have to understand over here?
And that understanding is a personal choice that every individual has that right. We call it free will. You might get touched by the Spirit at some moment that touch your heart. And if not, if you find yourself in a position of power, and I'm just saying through my lived intergenerational experience of the women that I brought forth in the room with me here in Georgia, because both sides of my family, from Troup County down in LaGrange, my grandfather drove for the Howes right here in Atlanta, to my father being one of the second string of African Americans here. And I'm saying all of this thinking about where we are, the historical and present reality, and the need for justice, science, and spirituality to come together. The planet, we call it climate change. We are experiencing impacts due to human influence. Any of you who've been in Atlanta long enough can notice changes in just our rainfall pattern. The amount of rain in the short amount of time. That's one of the impacts. So now, again, this social construct that becomes then our responsibility, the being, which is natural. Every time you wake up and you're blessed to have a breath, that's your being. I was taught your being is always great, all right? But that behavior,
And yeah, sorry.
no. And for me, it's that clarity, and I like to thank Mama Afia and Baba Wakesa through some tools around helping us to understand the impact of oppression happens on both sides. And we can go down the various list of what we want to be oppressive about, right? But the reality is the impact is the same as it relates to now the socialization of what? Our behavior. Right? And so that science of behavior, there's a whole field dedicated, like how do we connect it?
Yeah, and I mean, I think science and spirituality and religion, if we can combine them for a moment, can be interwoven into this pursuit of justice, but in a sense, they are tools used by human beings that can also be used for evil and for ill.
Right.
We know scientifically that someone living in oppression, it has all of these detrimental effects on their health and on their physical bodies getting influenced by this. Whether or not we choose to act on that decision to rectify that may be more, it's based on those decisions, but it's not inherent necessarily in our understanding and our acting in the world.
Yeah, and I think this is why the diversity is so important to science, is because it brings in different cultural understandings to still a very European, Western context of understanding and perception. So I, as a scholar of history, also understand indigenous and African perspectives that understand that there's certain things, we call it duality. It's not either or, it's and, all right?
Both and.
Yeah.
And those perceptions are starting from that point. I personally, in this fight for justice, using my science, had to come to you just got the light and the dark, the good and the evil, the 0 and the 1, right? The and, now your choice is what side are you on? That goes back to our behavior, our choice. And I think what is happening is a change where, because of technology, we are now able to be more global while even being more local. And so we are beginning to see a shift in how we behave. And we know that it's not.
The
Now,
danger in
question
that,
is, yeah, come
the
on.
danger in that,
Okay.
though, is that we become a talking point society.
When you say danger,
Danger in the sense that, as Rabbi was talking about, people that are evil make choices to gain power for themselves. Then, because all the stuff we're talking about right now really takes a lot of thinking on our part, a lot of digging. And that's, again, not the world we live in anymore. Technology, although I got a new phone a year ago, it took me almost a year to follow the directions to figure it out. So I'm not sure that it's all talking points, but you understand what I'm saying, is that stuff gets printed in Facebook and people take it as gospel. And the next thing you know, it's all over the place. 1,000 years worth of theology goes up in smoke in a 15-minute conversation. And I was realizing that the conversation that we're having, that we've managed to leave the moderator out of,
Take it away, go ahead.
at this point, is we could go on with this conversation for hours. Because, I mean, we're listening to each other, right? But the folks out here, they don't have that kind of time. So I think, I don't know where I want to go with that, except that I think that I don't want us to be dangerous in tying together justice and science and spirituality. I want to play the devil's advocate, if I can use that word for just a moment, and say, okay, how do we obtain this? I mean, I know that we got to understand where it comes from.
so I'll give you an example in data.
Okay.
In Atlanta, we have this corridor called I-20.
Yeah. Okay.
If you look at any of the maps, we see that I-20 becomes this defining line between quality of life health indices between individuals living south of I-20, individuals living north of I-20.
Yep.
The data says that a youth growing up in the zip code of 30310 will have a 12 to 18 year difference in quality of life expectancy, or life expectancy outcome, than a youth up in Buckhead. So that's the data. Now, because we're human, period, right? And in our humanity, we find ourselves in these social positions. When we find ourselves in these social positions, what is your role, understanding your position of power, wherever in that position you are in, to remember everybody's humanity? And I say so as a black woman watching another black woman go through the last 3 days
Oh, Lord.
Yeah.
with data to support. Why were some of those questions even being asked? And so, just a general pushback to say, you know, again, not a either or, but more of a and I say so in the and I pause because God is so great, and I'm thinking of it in the system that we live in, that we call Earth, Mother Earth, and all of the beautiful dances that we see and we don't see that happen. And so it is our responsibility.
Oh, yeah.
And the responsibility is for you to make a choice. And if you've made the choice, because we understand duality, know what side you're on. And once you know it, be assured that the other side that you ain't on is fighting just as hard as the side that you chose to be on.
I want to jump in and nuance a little bit the idea of there are people who are good and there are people who are evil. There's a very strong concept in Jewish tradition that each individual inside them has a good inclination and an evil inclination, and that we all have it, and it's how we choose to act on it. And we can turn that evil inclination into something positive. We can turn it into our motivating drive to get a job, to raise a family, to build a home. But that in each of us is that duality, is that choice that we have to make every day. And having those sort of bigger pictures in mind when we do that, and the impacts of those decisions and how we affect our power in the world, I think all play a role in that.
For me, sometimes the thinking of being a scientist, it gets too much, and my husband's like, keep it simple. And there's this book called A Course in Miracles. I don't know if any of you are familiar with this. That doctrine changed my life, as it gave me as a scientist an understanding of my ego and its role in this social construct of my beingness, my spirit in this natural world. And so for me, again, and just the choices that each individual has the right to make, you know, that's where it lies for me.
There's another piece from Jewish tradition. I feel like that's my role here to offer. You get the science piece, I'll do the Jewish piece. Someone went to the famous Rabbi Hillel and said, teach me the whole Torah, teach me the whole Bible while standing on one foot. And his response was, what is hateful to you, do not do to your fellow.
Right.
The rest is commentary, go learn it. And it's a subtle shift from what we commonly think of as the golden rule, what do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Thank you.
Right.
And it's this idea of like, live and let live. But if you don't like something, don't do it to somebody else. Like, if we could all live by that principle, we would have a more just world tomorrow. But part of that involves empathy and understanding what our actions might cause someone else to feel or to go through. So we've got these tools in our traditions and in our spiritual outlook, but there's that disconnect between actually acting in the world by some.
So we hosted a 9/11 service. We do an interfaith 9/11 service every 5 years. And one year the theme was the Golden Rule. Mm-hmm. And it's in every religion. It's in everything. It's universal.
Yeah.
All around the world, every faith walk includes the Golden Rule, from Confucius to the Bible. Let's shift gears a little bit here. And we have a soundtrack in the background because our church is an 8-day-a-week church, and there's a rock and roll band upstairs practicing. and I hope they're good. So we got a little background sound here. So, spirituality asks the question, why? Why are we? Why me, oh God, right? Why? And science tends to ask the question, how? How does this happen? What's going on here? And it's looking at the hows of how does something work, how does it not work? And justice, if I may, asks the questions, who and when? So you have three different aspects, but coming from different angles, yet they overlap and connect. But sometimes they argue with each other. Science goes, hey, that's not the right question. We're just trying to figure this out. And spirituality goes, wait a minute, no, the question is why. And justice is saying, hey, I'm getting impatient here. I'm ready for some change. I need some justice.
And even within scientific communities,
Yeah.
there's disagreement. And even within spiritual communities, there's disagreement.
Right.
But, you know, I think that's a helpful paradigm of where science and spirituality are trying to understand the universe, understand our place in it, using different tools and different approaches.
Yeah, I agree, and would like to kind of bring a different cultural perspective again. I think in the context of how it's being presented, it's still very separated, and I am from a school of learning where there is no separation really between the things that we're talking about. We say iwakwele, good character. You know, there's certain things when we talk about the character of a man or a woman or your humanity, you know, and I think we must remember that we're all at the end of the day human. Race is not real. I say so because it has real constructs.
I was wondering if you were going to say
I'm going to
that.
say it. It has real social
Go ahead.
constructs.
Go ahead.
But the reality of, I think if we remember first your own humanity and really what that means in an intimate way where you have to have those hard conversations, like where are you potentially versus those that you serve, right? As well as then, yeah, I see we have some questions too.
No,
Go
just
finish
some
what you're saying, then
Yeah.
we'll go to Q and A.
And after seeing your own humanity, remember that then it becomes the job of all of us to return every human being to that circle of humanity. I know that myself and the reality of being here, that the impact of systems have created biases. If you're not aware of them, or if you are, they're still there. And they, you know, how do I?
How many here are familiar with Star Trek? Right, Star Trek? Okay. You remember in Star Trek: The Next Generation, what was his name? The robot?
Data.
Data. Data was forever trying to put this all together. Because Data had all this data, right? His mind moves really, really fast. He can figure these things out. But the one thing he didn't have was what? Emotion. He couldn't feel. And, you know, some of their funniest shows were when he was trying to learn how to laugh. Yeah, you know. And so I think that what we're all kind of driving at is that maybe that is why it's hard sometimes to have this conversation, is because we have a tendency to separate stuff out. You know, when I put money in my wallet, well, when I used to put money in my wallet, I put 5s, 10s, 20s. I hang up my shirts at home, okay? Short sleeve shirts, long sleeve shirts, and it's color coded. So I probably have a mental problem, but
We don't have enough time for that.
right.
We
The
have to
point
get to-
is
we gotta get to
that
Q&A.
that we try to separate things out, and when we get nervous when we try to tie this together, and so I think that to your point, I think that's why sometimes in conversations it's so easy to lose that justice is meant for everyone. that science is really meant for everyone. That spirituality of some kind is meant for everyone. And your spirituality doesn't necessarily have to be mine. And your way of scientific exploration doesn't have to be James's. So I mean,
Okay.
you just
Let's
did
open it
an
up.
amazing job of making me think.
All right, so are there any questions from our amazing audience here? Please. I'm going to repeat it. You say it loud and I'll repeat it.
I was thinking of science, and the whole thing about the pandemic and masks and so forth and so on. And the argument that, how do you defend science without making it a new God? Without it, there are people who contend, whose political views are different than mine, that I'm elevating science too high. And that there needs to be other points of views about science that keep it on par with politics and justice and spirituality, but it keeps getting elevated in their eyes. And I want to defend science. Anyway, I don't know.
So the question is, how do you defend science without making it God, basically, in light of the politics and the pandemic and all that? So,
I think there are a lot of things in our society that we raise up to God-like idolatry levels. Fame, money, technology, and in some cases science. I think we have to remember that science is fallible, but it is the pursuit of knowledge and understanding. It is not the be-all and end-all, but it is our best way as human beings to understand a certain aspect of the world. But even then, it's incomplete. Science can't measure love between people. We know it exists, we sense it, we feel it, but science is limited. But it also is the best way to understand an infectious disease. We can't pray that away as much as we would love to.
I think we also have to realize that we are influenced by our environment way more than we want to give it credit for. I often tell people when we start to have these kinds of conversations, and somewhere in that conversation we're going to get into values, okay? And before that goes on very long, I will remind them that the values that they're telling me about is because they were raised in a capitalistic country, where the one with the most toys when they die wins. And they'll look at me and go, "Oh no, Pastor, that's not the way I think." But it's influencing almost the entire conversation, because you're talking about savings, you're talking about the cost of gas, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then, as the doctor pointed out, the way that gets distributed in conversations is wholly unfair, because before that conversation goes on very far, we're willing to let people die because of that economic system. So, my direct answer about letting science become a god is to, after about 30 years in ministry and being 67 years old, I've finally come to this conclusion. Science will never be God. They can't. There is nothing as great as God. God intended for us to have the conversation that we're having tonight. That's why we all have a free will. That's why we have a brain that is over and above anything else that we've ever bumped into. And it's probably why we haven't met people from outer space yet, because our brain hasn't taken in enough information to allow that to happen. And I only say that in half humor. Because I really believe whatever created us never intended for us to not think, to not explore, to not debate, to not learn.
But I'll add to that, what good is it if we don't apply it? And now I'm thinking
Well,
in the
there you
terms
go.
of applied science. Because what good is all of this knowledge that we're seeking if it is not to further us as humanity? And so I think one maybe way of connecting the science to the justice piece is through applying it, right? So that it comes out of the journals, it comes out of the academic institutions into the communities.
Well, you know, my smart aleck answer to that
Uh-oh.
is, the NBA has done that. You know, the average height of men used to be about 6'1".
Okay.
Now it's about 6'5". You can't find a power point guard anymore that's under 6'5". They've adjusted. People used to talk about the creation story, and people in the church get really upset with scientists when they start talking about evolution. Okay, and I have to laugh because I sit there and go, wait a minute. Do you really think that these two things are diametrically opposed to each other? The story that we've got about creation is how people understood what happened back then. We now know that some things are different. And that, again, I will go back to my danger point about the bullet points, is why we got to keep talking.
Yes.
Because we got to keep
Yes.
pointing those things out.
Okay, more questions?
Way in the back.
Yes, you in the back.
I have a question. I think many people may be familiar with how communities of faith, religion, and spirituality pursues justice in the world. But I don't know that many people are aware of how science pursues justice. And so I was wondering if we could talk about some examples of science in action in the real world connected to justice.
Okay, so the question is, people tend to be aware of spiritual bodies, temples, churches, mosques, working for justice, but may not be aware that there are scientists and scientific programs that are also working for justice. So,
I have
will
a
our two
brief-
scientists in the room please address that?
I imagine your answer is going to be longer. I have a brief but very, very topical answer.
Go for it.
When the pandemic first started, right out back here at the Decatur Makerspace, they were collecting parts to make PPE for healthcare workers. And I had a 3D printer at home, and I printed out a whole bunch of things. And it was the science and the engineering behind that 3D printing that me and other members of the community got together and utilized in order to keep people safe and to protect them. And so I think that's maybe one small example of how that can happen.
And my short answer is learning how to grow crops and distribution of food is incredibly important. The population is way bigger than it was when I was first born. We need a whole lot more food. And science has given us ways to what? Irrigate? Is that the word I'm looking for? Irrigation systems and how to beat some of the weather systems that are tearing up the crops and able to help us produce more food. It's all yours now.
I feel like this was a setup from the start. I didn't get all of the full details. I get it now, Jordan. You owe me.
Take it away, Dr. Lee. Go ahead.
Well, I think the reality is, and I like to talk about the West Atlanta Watershed Alliance and the great work that we're doing as one of two environmental justice organizations here, one of the other ones being Eco Action. And then I'd like to uplift Harambe House, one of the oldest, the oldest environmental justice organization in the state of Georgia. And so for the longest time, since the start of the environmental justice movement in Warren County, data has been right there supporting communities lived experiences in a way that those that were making the decisions understood. So community was saying, this power plant is not only putting pollutants in the air, we have all of this other reality that we see, cancer, asthma rates. Regulators understand particulate matter 2.5 and what limit over the threshold. And so data and the role of data is providing, I think, really the support in the spaces where communities are not just, are in places that don't have equitable access to things, under-resourced, underbanked, underserved. And so, and here in Atlanta, Wawa, as we're affectionately known, we're currently using a culturally relevant lens to be your city's climate champion through a national multi-philanthropic partnership of 6 cities. And so we are tackling things like urban heat. Dr. Nataki Osborne-Jelks did a conversation and a piece on urban heat. We also are actively participating in the Clean Energy Advisory Board. So Atlanta consistently over the last 10 years has ranked within the top 10, but most recently we're in the top, we are the top 5 highest energy burden city. And so what does that mean? How do we take the reality of what this means in this current moment? Because if you are a Georgia resident, your Public Service Commission race is coming up. Why is this important? Because this is the body that will be making decisions as it relates to a particular organization that controls our energy source. And so these are places where data have a real role. The Public Service Commission held a town hall meeting in Atlanta last night where a lot of community members talked about the impact, according to the data, that any potential rate increase would have, or, you know, how do we really talk about access to renewable energy and giving individuals who are most energy burdened net reduction. And so I think that there's definitely a role, and most importantly, there are organizations doing just this, connecting the science, connecting the data, and connecting community here in Atlanta.
Amen.
Amen.
Amen. So,
If you wanted a definition of justice, you just heard it.
absolutely, absolutely. So listen, folks, we are so grateful that you are here, and we want to give a big round of applause and thank Rabbi Dan Medwin and Dr. Erica Holloman Hill and Pastor Paul Turner, and welcome and thank you so much for this amazing experience tonight. And let's show our appreciation. Thank you so much. May God's blessings and peace be with you. Don't forget to fill out your evaluation forms.
And remember the words, very good, excellent.
Thank you.